Hello, Blazer fans, Blazers Edge readers. Welcome to the Blazers Edge Videocast. I am Sam Tung, along with Dave Deckard, editor of Blazers Edge. We have a new format going. You can read about it in the text above. We're actually going to be coming at you a couple times a week in shorter segments, which means less questions that we're going to ask during each video. And we want to dive right in, Dave. Part of what we're doing in the new Videocast is every week we're going to be providing a weekly recap, which talks about the week that was and the week up ahead and what's coming up for the Trailblazers. So, Dave, speaking of everything that's been happening on in Blazer land, the Trailblazers have lost 3 out of 4, at least coming into this video, and have a pretty tough, both a road trip and then a tough game at home against Oklahoma City after that. So your thoughts on kind of this skid for the Trailblazers and the next week or so upcoming?
Well, it feels a lot less like a skid, I suppose, than walking in kind of shin-deep slush. It's not like the Blazers have fallen and they can't get up or a disaster has befallen them, but everything they're doing a little bit slower. They're doing with a little bit less movement and trust, and they're doing a little bit less effectively. Offense and defense both. You're not seeing the same level of commitment for covering for each other on defense. You're not seeing the same commitment to rebounding from everybody, and the ability to garner offensive rebounds especially. And finally, and most importantly, you're just not seeing the ball and players move on offense as much. The Blazers have relied on their all-stars. Great for Aldridge and Lillard, but not so good for everybody else, and I think that's been cutting some points out of the Blazers' scheme.
How much of that do you think has to do with fatigue? I mean, it seems like they had the the stretch on the road against they had the Texas Triangle and then Oklahoma City to cap off that. Obviously, playing a lot of games. I think that we often see teams that are kind of they come up to the All-Star break and they're sort of gasping for air by the time they get to it. So, Dave, how much of this do you think is due to fatigue?
Yeah, some of it obviously is, and it has been a rough schedule, but come on, this is the NBA. Fatigue is a constant during the second half of the season. Fatigue is not going to go away for Damian Lillard. He's going to be all over All-Star Weekend, doing everything imaginable except selling popcorn, and they may even have him doing that. Aldridge is going to be participating in that as well. Everybody else will get kind of a rest, but how much fatigue is going to go away from Nicola Batum's broken finger? How much fatigue is going to go away from Mo Williams, and what difference will that make? I mean, he may be better rested, but is that going to change his game? I don't think so. So, fatigue is a factor, but it is not the factor in all of this, and you have to start to worry about A, whether the league has caught up to the Blazers, but B, whether the Blazers have really lost their way a little bit in terms of knowing what they want to do and being able to execute that, and where they can regain that confidence and trust.
It does seem a little bit, too, in addition to fatigue, I don't want to call it complacency, but the team is 20 games over 500. I mean, there has to be, everyone on the team has said, we want to be greedy, we want to be hungry, but at the same time, they are human. So there has to be somewhat of the thought that we've had so much success, what we're going to do is to continue to be successful. They obviously have this really, up until C.J. McCollum came into the lineup, the rotation was totally set in stone. It was extremely reliable and very successful. And I'm not obviously blaming this on C.J. coming into the lineup, but you do kind of get the idea, Dave, that this is a team that's been very comfortable, and this is kind of the first bump in the road, and it'll be interesting to see how they respond to, quite honestly, the first negative part of their season in the first 45 games or so.
Absolutely, and they've been comfortable playing the starters fairly big minutes and certainly relying on them for the bulk of the production. They've been comfortable winning games that they've had to squeak out, and maybe they shouldn't have entirely. I mean, you give full credit to Portland, but in any kind of massive winning jag the way they had early, there are always games where you figure, we squeaked by with that one. And that happened to the Blazers so much earlier in the season that I think it was probably a threat to them trying to remember why they were winning all those games, that this stuff doesn't just happen. And I think you're right, that success can be its own negative in a sense. I remember, quite frankly, when we first realized that Blazers Edge was basically the biggest thing going around the Blazers internet market anyway, and had become incredibly huge. And it's everything you've ever dreamed of, right? Millions and millions of people visiting every year and what have you. And that's not an exaggeration. That's not humor. That's literal. The first time those numbers hit you in the face, you go, oh my gosh. And then you think, well, I made it. And then you think, what now? And there's a huge adjustment period to that, trying to reset your goals when you've gotten everything you've always wanted. And it's really hard to motivate, to realign, and to keep things going. I think we see a little bit of a microcosm of that now. What's been the goal? What's been the driving stories the last couple of weeks? You know what it's been? LaMarcus Aldridge, is he going to start the All-Star game because he should? Damian Lillard, is he going to make the All-Star game because he should? That's been all over the media. I mean, Nicola Batum, I should make the All-Star team. Wesley Matthews, I should be in a three-point shooting contest. What does any of that have to do with winning? Are you so satisfied with all the games you won now that that part is done, and now this is the new goal? And it feels like the Blazers have kind of lost focus a little bit on the real goal of the season, what really matters.
Well, they're going to have an opportunity, you know, if they need a kick in the pants, they're going to get one this week, Dave. To give you the idea of the upcoming schedule, they continue this road trip. They're at New York tonight on Wednesday, and then they continue at Indiana on Friday night. Then they finish off the road trip, second night of the back-to-back on Saturday. That one's at Minnesota, a game that the Trailblazers really didn't play all that well their first time in Minnesota, and then they come home to host the Thunder. So they're playing against, you know, a team in New York that really has a lot to play for, is consistently looking for that reason to get the momentum back going, and then obviously a quality team in Indiana, certainly a good team, especially at home in Minnesota, and a player in Kevin Love that always seems like he has reason to play well when he plays LaMarcus Aldridge, and then coming home against Oklahoma City, where the Blazers will try to revenge that loss that they had a couple weeks ago. So, Dave, like I said, if they needed any reason before the All-Star break to get back in gear, if that were the issue, they're certainly going to have an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and the one you circle is the Wednesday game, New York Knicks, because the Knicks should not be able to take that game away from the Blazers. The Knicks are everything the Blazers would become if they started breaking real bad, so to speak. Star-dominated, jump-shooting-only team with a real serviceable center who's doing pretty well, but that's not enough to lift them above the mediocrity that their system and their own individual agendas cause. So the Blazers have to look at the Knicks and say, A, there but for the grace of God go we, and B, let's kick this team's butt. And if they do that, then you start crediting them for, you know, you get a win in Indiana, you get a win in Minnesota, maybe something like that, and you say, that was a great road trip. If they lose to the Knicks, there is no excuse for that. And it doesn't matter what they do to turn that around unless they win all of the remaining games before the All-Star break. You're going to look at that and say, look, they are now dropping games that they should win instead of winning games that they should lose. And you start to really worry a little bit, I think.
Well, that's going to be, as you mentioned, it's coming on the heels, too, of that game against Toronto when they nearly gave up the lead. A game against Washington when they really started out playing well and sort of let that one crumble as the game went on. I think that it's an excellent point. The other part of it too, Dave, it's on national television. It's the early game, and I think that people forget that this is living on the East Coast. I now understand why people don't watch games on the West Coast, because when they say it's a 10:30 tip, they really mean it's like a 10:45 tip. You might be able to watch the first part of the first quarter, and then you need to get to bed to go to work. So they are playing at 8 p.m. East Coast time, and I think that that's going to be a very good opportunity for them to solidify why LaMarcus Aldridge, Damian Lillard, and all these other guys deserve the kind of accolades they're getting. But I think that it might be a good opportunity for the Blazers to prove to themselves, again, that they deserve to be in this elite category, but they still need to play well in order to stay there.
Absolutely, and we will have to see. I'll be interested to see how that game goes.
Well, that's going to do it for this weekly recap. Again, we're going to be doing abbreviated versions of these videocasts. Coming up throughout the week, we have a couple other things ready for you, so keep an eye out for that here on BlazersEdge.com. We also want to remind you the main topic of our videocast are your emails, so send those in, blazersub@gmail.com, blazersub@gmail.com is the place that you can send those. So for Dave Deckard, I am Sam Tung. We will see you all soon.